year is sometime before 2000, and deep inside the offices of Sarah Brunei, one of the rarest, weirdest, and charmingest GameCube games was being developed for the Nintendo 64 disk drive. The disk drive being a Japanese-only peripheral for the Nintendo 64, giving it disk support since it was around then that video games were starting to be on disk and not cartridges. However, the game in question was then moved back to the iconic Nintendo 64 cartridge since the disk drive bombed. Fast forward to July 2000, IGN managed to translate the title of this game to something like Animal Thugs, leaving the masses confused, baffled, and perplexed. They had thought this was the weirdest game ever. No one, not even the programmers of this game, knew what they were getting into other than evolution, life, and love. 1 month later, it's Nintendo Space World 2000. IGN said the game in question had a great premise, but some serious holders wanted to appeal to a mainstream audience. It was at Nintendo Space World 2000 that the graphics were shown, having people think it was heavily stylized as a demented artist's cubic nightmare with a low polygon style, large letterboxing, a lack of cool effects, a low frame rate, and overall, cheesy. The gameplay, however, was simple and fun, in line with an EVO for the SNES, but more artsy. This game was like a confusing parasite, even being in Super Smash Bros. Melee with the trophy called Alpha, a creature in an imaginary cubist world where survival of the fittest is rule. These creatures have strong, efficient bodies and the cute faces of pandas. They form family groups and treat each other lovingly, yet have no respect for other beasts. Their favorite food seems to be meat and bamboo grass. Later on February 11th, 2002, IGN revealed development shifted to the GameCube, but it sadly did not gain much benefit from the power.
What's that game, you wonder? Well, imagine if you gave a Rubik's Cube sentience and dropped it into a world that's like a mix of Pokémon and Pikmin, with visuals similar to Ape Escape and Parappa the Rappers. That game, everyone, is Cubivore Survival of the Fittest for the Nintendo GameCube.
Cubivore Survival of the Fittest, which I'm just going to call Csoft for short, was released on February 24, 2002 in Japan, and later in the year on November 5, 2002 in the US. But the game didn't do well in Japan, and if it wasn't for Atlas USA localizing it and giving it the game we know it as, we would have never seen this. Csoft actually did above average with reviewers. Famitsu, a Japanese video game magazine, gave it a 32 out of 40, which would be about an 8 out of 10. Because of its creativity and unusual premise, it was unique from anything on the market at the time, and the critics just loved that. But the most common complaints were that the camera was frustrating and the gameplay was repetitive. Reviewers had mixed feelings about the graphics. They ended up being compared to a Nintendo 64 games, which makes sense. But some of them found it endearing to the game. The sound effects and soundtrack were also found to be charming, even if they felt the music was very repetitive. Because of all of that, Csoft was nominated to Best Graphics on the GameCube and the Best Game No One Played on the GameCube at GameSpot's Best and Worst of 2002 awards. However, both awards went to Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, and Sega Soccer Sam respectively though.
A soccer game being the best game no one played? Well, maybe that's because people were too busy playing real soccer. Think about it!
Csoft's front cover has 3 Cubivores. This one looks like a lizard, this one looks like a shiny Lopunny, and this one looks like my sleep paralysis demon if my sleep paralysis demon was a duck with horns and an Escape saw on its forehead. Actually, that is scarily accurate. Minus the cubic shape, obviously. The Japanese cover, meanwhile, has a lot more Cubivores, a good handful of them taking shape of various objects in the real world like a mug, a couple of chairs, and even an airplane. They're all thinking of various things like woke, food, poo, death, and more. On the back of both of them, there's images from the game. The US one invites you to a world where using your animal instincts, you'll explore hostile environments, stalk your prey, and rise to the top of the animal kingdom. And it tells you about the abstract game style, how the sound is immersive, and that the gameplay is addictive if you have the combination of strategy, instinct, and luck you need to survive. Oh, it also tells you to select your prey and mates in the most effective way possible.
Oh, thank God, I love selective breeding!
On the Japanese cover's backside, it roughly says, "Isn't that the case? I want to run, crash into something, eat it all, get stuffed to the brim, and fall asleep right there." Or don't you think so? That's proof you're not getting enough energy. Animal Banjo is a game that helps you get back your energy. These spirit creatures move around in an unbearably lively way. Players can follow their instincts by running, hunting, eating slugs, fighting, and getting stronger. Aim to become King of Beasts. Also, this cloud wants to partake in gluttony for some reason. Odd. The manual goes over a lot about what the game just tells you, like the section about the colors various Cubivores can be, for example. You get told this in the game, and it isn't that hard to realize it before it gets mentioned. At the very end of the manual though, there's an ad for Cubivore-themed toys. 8 different toys, each customizable, with 6 meat flaps and more. They're eating their way to a store near you.
What is it going to be like the Blob?
The toys are also wicked expensive. This one of a Hobo Beast costing 65 USD.
And to be honest, I'm kind of excited to be taking a look at my first GameCube game. I mean, most of the games I've taken a look at so far are just NES games, and Cubivore Survive the Fittest is such a weird, out of left field game that I genuinely think AAA video game companies can take a few notes from it.
I mean, so many games are all just the same. In the eyes of some people, if you want to be a real gamer, you need to play games that involve guns, war, are dark and gritty, don't do anything to innovate the medium, and end up being nearly impossible to go play. Okay, well, Cubivore is hellishly expensive, and I doubt anyone would be willing to spend this much on a GameCube game.
If only there was a way to play a video game without spending any money on it. Can I help you? I'm trying to talk about a game right now. Well, I'm sure that isn't worth talking about. What I want to find out, though, is what can the modern age of gaming learn from Cubivore Survival the Fittest? And to figure that out, we need to play the entire game to completion.
Seesaw starts off like any other game, with a Cubivore version of the GameCube logo roaming the area before, right in front of us, taking a dump. A bunch of limbs then go over to the poop as the title fades in. After that, it cycles through various Cubivores doing various hijinks and growing limbs. When we start the game and pick a file, which we can also name... Oh, wow, this is actually the first time I'm going to be naming something on the inspection. I need to make it good, No, that's way too boring. Cragglitson. Yeah, Cragglison. That's what I'll call the save. Seesaw gives you a lot of information when you pause. There's the bestiary, which shows all the various forms you can unlock. The status gives you general information about the map you're in, and it's just full of notes about stuff in the game. The rulebook is the final one you can access, and acts as a glossary for stuff about the game. And when you're playing, you can end up unlocking more stuff for the rulebook. Although when you're in a battle and pause, all of this is for some reason unavailable. Like what? Are they expecting you to write this stuff down? They put it in the game, just let me keep it. Oh, yeah, I did write down how many mutations I had in a chart, so... Yeah, I still think it's annoying that they did that, though. The stuff the rulebook tells us from the Gekiro, in order, pressing Y lets us scream and freeze or make enemies keel over. Color me is how we get mutations by getting the right colors, sometimes in the right order. If we press C, we can get rid of the most recent color. Easy mutating lets us go back to various mutations, once marked red in bestiary, by pressing left or right on the D-pad. Our stomach is our health. Strong beasts have strong stomachs. Eating out of beast, hobo beast, bugs, and or snack grass gives us back our health. There are also these items called rejuvenators, which, when using them, restores all of our health. If we don't want to use rejuvenators, that's fine, because there's oases in various parts of the map, and if we sit in the water, our health is going to quickly fill up. So no matter how you decide to get health back, you're not going to be seeing a game over often because you're basically handed health. Mutations happen when we collect all of one color or a specific set of colors. There are pale, pale dark, dark, clash, and rage colors / mutations. And we need to get 100 mutations to beat the game. The rate arrows are minimap. Red equals beast, green equals hobo beasts and bugs, white equals wilderbugs and bosses, pink equals mating grounds, and orange equals door to the next land. We can get rid of by having one of our limbs getting eaten, but eating a beast lets us get them back. We can pounce by aiming with L and pouncing it with A. And the consummate is the fox you will meet when you're a king of Cubivore. And she also has a child who will slay to kill a Cubivore, this game's main antagonist. Anything else that the rulebook has, I'll just mention it when it gets unlocked. Obviously. All good games start off with a character, and we play as Cragglison!
We were naming our character too? If I knew that from the get-go, I would have just filled my ego!
Cragglison is also, for some reason, a pig. Primal Mighty Might Piggy Cragglison. Has a specific ring to it. Then we get into the backstory of the game. The world was full of wilderness, and colorful beasts that thundered across the plains. But then, one day, colorless chrome beasts arrived and devoured the wilderness. Soon after, the land was no longer wild. The colorless beasts then kept all of the wild inside their ashen bodies until raw meat formed, making them insanely powerful. Amongst all of them, though, was a beast with 6 pieces of raw meat. This beast was known as the Killer Cubivore and became king of the entire world, helping on consuming all of the wilderness. If nothing is done, the wilderness will disappear, and the world will wither and fade. I want to live. That was the first ever thought I had. I want to be alive.
Well, that sure is a backstory.
After the intro, it transitions into the game, starting with a sunrise in Paladins, as Piggy Craggleston falls into a nest, rejoices at being alive, hell-bent on eating and eating to become king of the Cubivores. Eating beasts aside, to become king, that's going to involve having our abilities get stronger via training at training grounds. This training ground is of a wooden horse, and it gets our attack level up, and even gives us horns that can go to 100 levels. But everything else goes to 70. The training grounds end up being out of use after a few goes though. We don't need to just hope we can find a training ground to level abilities up though, as there's also bits, this specific one being a hump bit, which are just cubes that we can eat and level up our abilities with. And in this case, we can level up our healing level. The other various training grounds are our Rampage Bowl, which grows our defense level, the Bullfrog Soul lets us improve our eat and run, and Toad Souls let us practice hunting and toughen up our tongue. There are also these love bits, which, when eating, our love points grow up, and with love bugs, they give us free love bits, but they move around obviously. This is really useful for mating, because we need to mate to get more limbs. We can also get new mutations from it, but not all the time. And when we get 100 love bites, every female we end up attracting has a child for us. Oh, finally, our false enemy! Every enemy in this game has some mutation, each with a unique name and color. As Craggleston says, this Cubivore is a Tire Jack Cubivore, which is just a pale yellow Cubivore. I honestly really like how every mutation has unique names and themes, like hairstyles, clothing, and romance for example. I find it really charming, but I didn't let the pale yellow Cubivore live. Instead, I ate some and took its color, becoming a Tire Jack Cubivore myself. Not even a minute later, I do the same exact thing with a different Cubivore. And just over a minute after that, we see a dark-colored Cubivore, and it's even stronger, but no Cubivore is too strong for Craggleston. When you finish going through a stage, you get a recap that goes over what you did in each stage, the stage you conquered, how many times you mutated, the types of mutations, the stats about the mutations, etc, etc. After that, we then get a bit of a bramble from Craggleston that may have useful information in it, and a poem afterwards. We always get these after finishing a stage. The full sentence basically has Craggleston still hyper about his first say of being alive, and dreaming of a wild, full wilderness, and wishing to bring color back. Here's the following poem. Eating the color from meat makes my body take on many shapes. It's the vitamin D, or perhaps the protein, or maybe the savory taste. Piggy Craggleston.
And this is basically how Csoft works for the entire game. Fight some Cubivores, eat their colors, mutate into different colors, repeat 100 times until you're king. Thankfully later on, more and more Cubivores and general little gimmicks get introduced, so it isn't completely repetitive.
Here you can see a section of the colorless wilderness which is just white/pink, or as Craggleston puts it, it's as white as snow. That is pink. I should know. It snowed in Florida a while ago, and we don't see snow that often. Thankfully, by eating these specific wilderbugs with the mark of wilderness on them, wilderness gets returned to the terrain and we can explore the area. Here we can see our first two-limb Cubivore. As expected, they're tougher than a one-limb Cubivore, but what's tougher than a two-limb Cubivore is the first boss we encounter, the Cub Scout Beast. The boss names in this game are really odd. Some of my favorites are Parental Advisory Beast, Health Inspector Beast, Conman Beast, Hitman Beast, and the Neighborhood Watch Beast. The Cub Scout Beast is the first boss in the game, and it has a piece of raw meat too! But it's guarded by two Panda Cubivores. And to be honest, when you don't forget how to eat limbs, like how the hell did I forget that? The fight is honestly pretty easy. But oh my god! The boss music and the song that plays when you get the raw meat is so repetitive. At least with the ladder it doesn't take long, but if you leave the boss, the music will still play. Why can't they just have it so it fades away when you leave the area? Because I forgot how to eat limbs, I died. But that lets me talk about what happens when you get a game over. You just go back to the beginning of the stage and don't need to redo anything.
Hell yeah.
When we do get raw meat, we can mate with the female Cubivores at the mating grounds. Oh my god, this song is repetitive too. When we see how many females we attracted, some of them only have even made children in their weird cubey bodies. Ew, yuck. Our children always have an extra limb than us, and we can see which mutation the children are. More often than not, I went with a mutation they didn't have, or thought looked funny if there wasn't a new mutation.
Yeah, for some reason I didn't think to read the manual and go with mutations based off their abilities. which they do have, and I'll get into in a bit.
Oh, this game has a day-night cycle, how fun. When the moon shows up and then sets, your Cubivore ends up painting to sleep, for dreaming about something always related to the general situation in the level, like fighting a boss for example. Speaking of bosses, a bit later on I came up with a very scuffed plan for taking on bosses I like to call Operation Machine Gun. Operation Machine Gun is basically just doing attack after attack, making sure that the enemy I'm attacking can't get any hits in, even if the boss's goons try to attack me. I don't know how effective it is, but it works well enough for me to not throw it away in the early game. With this boss in question, I had to bite limbs off multiple times since I wasn't strong enough to kill the boss in one go, but when you get a Vang from mating, you can end up biting off more pieces, and after defeating that boss, we can block better by pressing the B button. This section here is a warning for the future. There were a lot of Graydons, way too many for this game. It doesn't help that there were the Scoutmaster Beast goons, and god damn it the Scoutmaster Beast bit me. Why am I not mutating to defeat it faster? I'm literally shooting myself in the foot here. Eventually though, like 1 minute and 30 seconds after getting munched on, I did defeat the Scoutmaster Beast, giving me raw life, turning me into the perfect pig. Now I can finally mate with a giant lady. Kraglison has Riz! The lady that comes across us is a bear, who then praises us for defeating the Scoutmaster Beast and fucking hates us! Holy shit, Deviant would love this game! We then get a recap of how many mutations we made as a pig, and Kraglison basically says, as a plant, that he's shocked about having been eaten, but is into it. I won't kink shame. He then recalls his history about being a pig, the fun journey he had, possibly even setting a swine world record. But this isn't the end. He needs to become king via eating with abandon, bringing wilderness back to the world, mutating until he's blue in the face and getting some good loving. Oh, if only he was born again. After getting eaten by the giant lady Cubivore, we end up in a place called Rainbow Heaven, which basically tells you a bit more about how Seasoft works. Here, it introduces species, bugs, herbibeasts, other various forms, that dark meat makes you stronger, and more. But the manual, your own common sense, and ability to pick up on context clues does this too. What a shock. After learning about how the world works, you can go back to the wilderness via this magic portal. But instead of staying as a pig, you then turn into a bear? Well, Kraglison is taking this role, so I guess it's just a norm here.
Good to know Buddhism is canon in the Cubivore lore.
When continuing your journey, you're gonna end up coming across very similar areas as before, but I feel like they aren't the same area, even if they are. They changed, so now they're technically a different area. One thing I actually kind of like about this game is that when we complete a lap, there were Cubivores that are animals we were. So here, to Grizzly, Crackles, and Sock, are a bunch of friendly pig Cubivores, meaning they don't attack us, but they might run away from us like, come on, we have the same goal, let me eat you! Seeing them makes it feel like I'm slowly but surely getting closer to the whole end goal of defeating the killer Cubivore and saving the world from being this white modern up painting that's just a one-to-one recreation with the default screen when you open up MS Paint for the first time. It's actually kind of funny since a bit later, Kraglison is really reluctant to eat the pig's limbs, meaning he forgot he was a pig, but I didn't.
I want all the colors I could possibly need. I will show no mercy.
Oh, speaking of wanting colors, there are actually these things called slot tokens which such as gamble for colors. But they suck. You're never gonna get the color you want because it's gambling. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start, bang sorta jazz. Except you don't become a cool brought back from the dead mailman. You're still this weird little thing with just different colors. Now before I get into any fun new information, what the fuck is this? In a game where you're going to be moving around a lot, in what fucking way does it make sense to have a random handful of mutations where you don't want to rock in that direction, you point the control stick? Sure, mutations like this are optional, but what if it's your strongest mutation? You're basically stuck going forward when you're holding right. That's like if you're driving but when you try to do a simple right turn after getting a new paint coat, you're still going straight, doomed to crash into a wall until a monster truck suddenly sees you and commits a hit and run, but you can't react fast enough because you're not going the way you want to go! It's just really dumb, and I don't know why they thought that would be fun to do. It's more like a challenge, a restriction. It's annoying. Games don't do that sort of thing often. Maybe for a minute at most. Anyways, now with that out of my way, we are then at Whitestone Highlands, the first area that starts to showcase my problems with the game. solely because there's a bunch of enemies all bunched in one area, making fighting any single enemy really difficult for no reason. Thankfully, Right Side Highlands isn't as bad as other future areas, but it's like looking at the future through an open window. No matter what you do, fight, mutate, heal, hordes of Cubivores are gonna want us dead. Okay, here I wrote down something Luigi, something United, something not topical, because the CEO beast is called that. But it isn't the CEO of anything, and it's just an animal. It is kinda ironic how we get the raw claw from defeating it though, since we can lock onto enemies we're running. What, I'm not really the right person to talk about something as big as... you know. Either way, I've written myself into a corner, just like how we don't get to leave White Side Highlands after defeating the CEO beast. Smooth transition. Every now and then, specific levels in the game will have multiple bosses. Defeat boss, new boss shows up. After defeating the CEO beast, we then get the Parental Advisory Beast. You know, I understand why we have parental advisory warnings, but it's just... definitely some interesting naming in the Grizzly Lap. We don't even get anything from an Eater. Truly, this says a lot about society. Later on in the game, we see our full 6-limb beast. Very horrifying. I'm gonna be having nightmares for weeks now. I only mention it now since we can't fight beasts that have 2 or more limbs than us, and having this titan of a Guarodon does the job well. Horrifying. Just as horrifying as the killer Cubivore is in Kraglison's mind, but he isn't not determined to give it his best shot. He also just breaks the 4th wall and tells us that the next rump meet is divided among 4 Harbor Beasts. Not a typer in my script, see, it says it right down in the game. The bosses with the raw shells are bafflingly weak. Maybe it's because I got lucky, had a good mutation, or they are just wicked weak, but if they're all gonna be like this, then the last one is gonna be a oh my god, run! Run, Kraglison, they're everywhere! How did they clone themselves? Oh dear god! Yeah, that's a little overwhelming. So wicked easy to despite the bountiful amount of the Health Inspector B. Okay, why is it called that? What do bears have to do with wanting to dismantle the important parts of society? The B movie is not a suggestion on how to solve our problems. It wasn't out when this game was on the market! The raw schnoz thankfully lets us blend in with our surroundings by standing still or moving slowly. But if we make any sudden movements, like pouncing, we don't blend into the area anymore. It's honestly kinda helpful, but I didn't get much use out of it. On the bright side, though, we are officially 1/4 of the way to 100 mutations. Kraglison can smell the females, smelling the consummate. Get that man the raw life. Ultimarch is the first of 2 places that really, and I mean really, suck to go through. Like with White Side Highlands, this place is very open, but none of the enemies are in one area. Instead, there's smaller clusters of enemies each in various corners of the map, but the District Attorney boss and its Guarodon posse circle the map, meaning you can't get a moment of peace since they eventually see you and attack you. And since when you get your 5th from the District Attorney boss immediately shows up, that means from that moment to you defeating it, you're going to be hearing the same over and over and over again. I mean, fuck, no wonder TVs have the ability to mute audio. This is so annoying. Surprisingly though, I was actually starting to be smart here by taking on one enemy and ignoring the rest. Good idea. But it didn't last long. Focusing on one enemy is basically how you can manage to get better mutations besides planning and junk. After 16 minutes, oh my god. In Ultimarch, I defeated the District Attorney beast and got the raw life, once again allowing me to mate with the ultimate. Now as a big bad bear, but we already noticed yes, mating in this case is just vor. Whatever, at least she called us a bear in sheep's clothing. Fun title. But a bear recap, Kraglison reflects on his life as a bear, 5 limbs being the limit for a bear. He knows he needs to go beyond bearhood, so he begs and prays to be the freakiest beast ever if he just gets one more chance to live. Once again we end up in Rainbow Heaven, before then quickly going over to a platform and learning about Rage Beasts. They're the strongest beasts in the game, and they have bold colors called Rage Coloring. And just like pale/dark colored beasts, you can mix their colors, but there's a very specific way to mix their colors. The class chart shows us how Clash Beasts, mixed Rage Colored Beasts, work. Yellow Brates are Rage Yellow and Red, Red Apes are Rage Red and Blue, Greodons are Rage Gray, Yellow, Red, Blue, and Purple, etc. You can also repeat colors, so if you're a 6-limbed Clash Yellow Brate, you would need 5 yellow limbs and 1 red limb, or 4 red limbs and 2 yellow limbs. Because if all of your limbs are one color, then you would just be a Rage Yellow or Rage Red beast, for example. After going back to the wilderness for a second time, we find that we're a chicken?
God damn it, I continue to dance close to topical events.
Not a world chicken, bear cubivores are also friendly. Oh, and speaking of bear, later on after finishing this area, Cracklison finally remembers that he was a pig and a bear. Now since the chicken lap is the last lap, a lot of the stuff in it is stuff I've already talked about. So despite it taking me an hour longer than the pig or bear lap, there was one really annoying part I need to talk about. Killing Plains manages to be a cluster of every single problem I have with Cubivore Survival of the Fittest. To start, besides a few stray Greodons, every single cluster of enemies is right by a mating area. Sure, the devs thought to put in races for tons of Horror Beast here, but there's still a cluster of enemies right by it. Yeah, they don't load it in when you're at the oasis, but they're still there. In one of the corners there's a bunch of love bits and bits, but there's also a bunch of Greodons here. Why the hell are they here? Risk versus reward? It's a pretty shitty risk versus reward since the risk is hiding from you like a little crybaby who needs some mommy when they don't get their way. Now obviously my problems with the game are valid problems, but looking back on it, at most they range from annoying to really kinda annoying. And on my first time being at Ultima Ocean Killing Plains, my problems are mostly revolved around the fact that I didn't know what I was doing. Take this fight for example. Here I am, trying to fight a strong Cubivore when I'm not even in a Clash or Rage mutation, let alone a solid Dark mutation. And yeah, I still think it's really dumb that a game based around gaining mutations has a lot of Greodons, but nothing was stopping me from finding the Greodons first, and then getting the rest of the mutations. That's called being smart and planning, which is an important part of the game. I am, however, happy to announce that as far as I know, I did actually be smart with this Greodon. Look at me go. Another thing I still don't like about the Seasoft is that if you have, like me at this time, Rage Blue, Rage Red, and Dark Gray, the game will automatically get rid of the Rage Red and Rage Blue, instead pushing the Rage Blue to the false right and giving you 2 Rage Gray. But again, this is a problem with me since I wasn't getting rid of the colors, which is literally the first thing you see when you turn on the game. Maybe I just got confused when Clashing was introduced and I just assumed, oh, so it will just give me the colors I need. Got it.
But this specific gameplay was from July 10th to July 11th last year, and all I remember from that time was that I was really depressed, played a lot of Roblox Surf, listened to one Danish bubblegum pop album, started rewatching Parks and Rec, and had a lot more fries in that time than I had in the past 5 years.
I'm doing a lot better though, both in my personal life and me playing the game, so don't worry. Like see, I defeated the post-National Cubivore. But at the time of this gameplay being recorded, fuck, I'm getting going by these blue kites. Just let me mate you betas! One positive I do have about Killing Plains is that the 2 bosses here are really unique with their dodge and attack. The post-natural Cubivore just raises itself so its body is higher than you by a lot, and the Conjuring Cubivore literally just attacks you by yelling sometimes. But even then, Killing Plains isn't impossible, just annoying.
He's fucking losing it.
Wildlife Safari is the last level in the chicken leg, and while it isn't as bad as Ultima Ocean Killing Plains, it's still annoying if you don't know what you're doing and or you aren't strong enough. But if you have 100 mutations, you end up going to fight the Killer Cubivore. If you don't have them, however, you're then able to replay the 3 legs in any order you wish until you get the rest you need. Unsurprisingly, the enemies here are strong. Like, wow, look at that 150 damage. But the Muscleman Cubivore was a lot easier to take down than expected. He gave us the raw people, which such as keep our humps, horns, skull, and etc. permanent no matter how many times you get reborn. The Hitman Cubivore, who was the Killer Cubivore before the current Killer Cubivore because the Hitman Cubivore got dethroned, is also very easy, and you get the raw life from him, which would let you mate with the Consummate and then fight the Killer Cubivore if you had 100 mutations, but I didn't. So I had to play the game until I got all 100 mutations, so you know, a giant pig lady eats us raw, rinse, repeat. At this point in the game, I was basically halfway there with 45 mutations. Finally, somehow I've made it. Didn't quite make the cut for King of the Cubivores, but I did crawl upon the ground and gather meat and become pig, bear, and broaden my journey to the ends of the wilderness. And now, as I look back, I see that this wilderness is now teeming with beasts descended from my blood. They are fighting, mating, trying to spread this blood even further. I feel happiness, a wild sort of happiness, and yet, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I had become King of the Cubivores. Now I would script down the fun journey I went on playing the game again to get more mutations, but it really isn't all that interesting besides a few specific parts. Those being that new doors were open, Kratos and remembered he was a pig during the bailout, Blue Kaito annoying to fight, Venerate Beach having Cubivores running to the sea, which they've never done before, to color crossings via the doorway in Wildlife Safari, and ended up with 83 mutations before I didn't touch the game for a long time.
Now the reason I didn't touch the game for a long time was, well, I said it. I was depressed. There was just too much going on in my personal life for me to be able to keep up with that, manage my main channel, and the inspection all at the same time.
So, I just ignored the channel besides putting out 2 shorts, and it wasn't until August 14th specifically where I sort of refound myself and promised I would get everything back on track, including clearing out my backlog of videos, which mostly consisted of digging around the Trigger Happy Havoc and Mega Man playthroughs on my main channel. So between August 15th, 2024 to last month when I finished my Mega Man 4 review, I slowly but surely slashed down the backlog until all that was left was this very video. So on the 1st of February, I recorded the soon-to-be finished game once again. After failing to get a 6 Slim Dark Gray Dawn mutation, I then decided to go to Color Crossings as the last hope of getting one more mutation, specifically a Rage Yellow mutation. Cause, yellow is the inspection's color. Unfortunately though, I ended up getting a Rage Yellow/Red mutation instead, so I pivoted to getting a Rage Blue 6 Slim mutation, cause blue is the opposite of yellow, and the first every mutation I got all the way back as a pig was pale yellow. And it worked! I ended up getting 100 mutations, with Freeze Rage being the last mutation to my name. For the third and final time, a big lady fucking ate us. Thus, the beginning of the end of the Cubivore. In order to fight the ultimate beast, I must use the strongest form I've ever mutated to. Good advice, Kragosin. Only a moron would ignore it. We end up in this place called Bosses Galore, which basically acts as a boss rush, but the type where you need to fight every single boss at once. But I'm so strong at this point that it's really, and I mean really easy, only taking me about 10 minutes to do so. After fighting all of the bosses prior, we end up in a new area of Bosses Galore with the Killer Cubivore and 4 beasts with it called Diva Beasts. Kraglison might read himself, I'm locked and loaded, and the repetitive boss music fades in. After inevitably defeating the Red Ape, losing 3 limbs, defeating the Yellow Brait, regaining 8 limbs, defeating the Purple, and then the Blue Kite Diva Beast, all that was left was the Killer Cubivore. Even though the Killer Cubivore is strong, don't get me wrong, I'm still doing 100-ish damage on it with every single bite. And within the span of 3 to 4 minutes, I defeated the Killer Cubivore, thus becoming King of the Cubivores and returning color to the wilderness. All shall remember Kraglison's name for 1,000 years, and his children's name for 2,000 years! They were also named Kraglison for some weird reason. Cubivore Survival of the Fittest ends with King Kraglison letting off a mighty roar and then running off into the moon after killing the Killer Cubivore. We then get a victory message. At last, the day has finally come. You've reached the top. You are King of the Cubivores, you are Lord of the Beasts. You ate and have been eaten, mated, and even died. But by continuing to mutate into 100 distinct forms, you have defeated your ultimate enemy. At last, the King of the Cubivores, aka the Killer Cubivore. The world is full of wilderness again. The outro then shows the various credits, and Kraglison traversing the once again colorful wilderness as king. It also shows a pig, bear, and chicken Cubivore as a callback to our journeys as free animals. After all of that though, we then see this hollow Cubivore. I don't know if it's meant to be a hint to a sequel. To be frank, the idea of a game like this getting a sequel would be really ambitious, but I like to think it's a previous king, before the colorless. Looking on at pride in my efforts, and once we get back to the title, we can see Kraglison surrounded by a bunch of ladies. We can also do the boss rush plus final boss again if we wish.
And well, That's Cubivore Survival of the Fittest. I have to say, for a game that's considered weird repetitive, but all in all pretty good, yeah.
Don't get me wrong, Csoft is a really unique and charming game that has its own style and character, but at its fullest, it's really repetitive and really annoying if you don't know what you're doing. I can only imagine if I was smarter and played the game how it needed to be played, I would have a lot less troubles on levels like Ultimarch and Killing Planes. Two things I mainly should have gone with in mind is do laps of the area and form a plan for the information you have. I didn't do this until the third time I was in Wildlife Safari though, but it was wicked helpful to get the last few I needed.
If I had to give Cubivore Survival to Fittest a rating, I would give it 6.5 out of 10 Rage, Blurokite, 6 Slim, Chicky Cracklesons. Don't get me wrong, Csoft is a pretty good game, but it isn't that replayable. Hell, by the time you get to the chicken lamp for the first time, you've basically seen a majority of the new stuff. I really like how charming the game is as a whole though.
The mutation designs are all fun, the abilities are helpful and give a sense of power. I also really like the little gimmicks that help the game not blend into one single colored line, like when the Frost Nose was in full separate beast, and the last one multiplied. That was traumatizing. But in terms of what I didn't like, I found the camera to be difficult to work with at times. I loathed it when the game wouldn't give me the mutation I had. Fighting enemies when they're all abundant in one area is not fucking fair at all, and I don't know why they did that.
But like I said earlier, most of the problems are on me, so I feel pretty secure in saying that if you play Cubivore Survival of the Fittest, you'll have a great time. But it isn't one you're going to want to go back to unless if you want to get the last mutation you didn't get, cause yeah, 5 colors for 5 different types going from 1 to 6 limbs. Do the math, that's 150 mutations. But I'm not going to try to grind this game any more than I already did. However, what can modern gaming learn from Cubivore Survive the Fittest? I don't know man, take risks and stop realizing that the same goddamn soulless cash grab games are going to keep the industry alive. You know what I think? I think I need to follow in Craggerson's footsteps and become king of the video game industry. I'm in fucking debt!
I don't feel bad for starting it off like that. I gave myself this entire month to make this video, this review, this 37, 38, 39 minute long review. And I am so astronomically happy that since that I finished it, because I had this video, I started working on this since July, and I quit working on it because, as I said in the video, I was depressed, and it's just genuinely, absolutely insane. Thank you if you've made it this far. Genuinely, I feel this weight being lifted off of my shoulders, and I'm king of the YouTube industry, even though this channel only has 115 subscribers right now. Probably because of the shorts, but also because of the Mega Man 4 review, which did really well despite my months and months long hiatus. Thank you for getting that to 600 views right away. I don't really know, this is the 10th episode of The Inspection, and the fact that it actually has this personal story interwoven with it is really cool to me, and I really like that, and I hope you like it. I really enjoyed what I did this time around. This is definitely going to be one of the episodes. It sort of marks a very specific point, because before I even had most of my notes, I didn't know how I was going to tackle this. I thought this video was going to be 10-15 minutes long. It's not, dude. It is so long. But I'm really happy with how I took my swing at this. I'm not going to ramble for much longer. I'm just really happy that I finally have this video out in the world. I'm all giddy about it. So thank you for watching. One more time, please subscribe, send it with a friend. Maybe your friend wants some weird, obscure game. Genuinely, this game would be right up your alley. It's so weird but amazing. But you know that. You watched the video. Bye.